So Chelsea comfortably through to the knockouts of the Club World Cup, beating Esperance 3-0 in Philly. A very comfortable victory in the early hours of the UK morning. I have to admit, plain honesty, I didn't stay up to watch it. I watched it this morning to give you my review. Credit to those who did, and I think it's when I was in Australia a couple of years ago, you get a newfound appreciation for kind of how those outside the UK have to deal with Chelsea games and the ridiculous times most of our games are on. So I think a lot of us have an appreciation for that. But this was obviously a really positive night for Chelsea, and really it started off positive even before kickoff when we realised that Benfica had beaten Bayern Munich, which effectively meant Chelsea, if they got through, if they avoided defeat, which was very likely in this game, that they would meet Benfica in the knockouts rather than Bayern Munich. And it's weirdly turned out where that Flamengo defeat has actually helped Chelsea's route potentially to the final versus Flamengo, who've had an incredible tournament, and from like a blockbuster kind of knockout round type of thing where they're going to face all the big European teams. They're going to get that if they get through, but I'm sure they're wondering, why did we finish top? Why didn't we just lose to Chelsea? And we would have had an easier run to the final. So I spoke in my preview about how this game I felt was one obviously for a lot of rotation and for a chance to bring in some new names to try and freshen things up. And that's exactly what Enzo Maresca did. This lineup effectively killed the narrative and the idea that Maresca is somehow being hamstrung by some FIFA contract. I've gone through this, I've written about this as well, and I just think it really is a silly argument because it was derailed even before the tournament kicked off. I just never quite bought that FIFA could enforce a rule that meant that coaches had to play their strongest 11, because objectively, like, a coach can turn around and go, well, that is my strongest 11 based on this opponent. So I always thought it was unenforceable, but quite clearly very early on in this tournament, we saw the likes of Man City, Real Madrid rotate, and Bayern Munich rotate very heavily for their Benfica game. This was in some ways a bit of a Conference League lineup. And I don't say that like dismissively to rubbish all the players playing. It was a very rotated lineup. Jorgensen, Josh Achimpong, happy to see him. Tosin, Badiashile, Gusto at left back, Enzo, Lavia, Dewsbury-Hall, Nkunku, Madueke, and Liam Delap. So you kind of have a blend of, a few players there. I think, you've got the likes of Josh Achimpong, who I'm really excited to see, who I do think was positive on this night. You've got Liam Delap continuing to play. Christopher Nkunku, I'm going to speak about him because obviously reports have come out recently about a potential swap deal with Man United that I don't think any of us want. And again, Nkunku playing is an interesting quirk of this tournament because I don't think many of us expected him to get any minutes based on his Chelsea future. And we'll get to that. But a lot of changes made. And again, it was a bit like, I know I say this, it sounds dismissively, it sounds disrespectful, but there's just no way of getting around it. It still kind of feels like pre-season. It feels like and again, it's the kind of confirmation bias, it's the kind of the muscle memory of watching Chelsea in America in early hours of the morning and thinking, this is pre-season, this is not the real stuff. But then also when you see the flurry of changes, the disconnect between certain levels of the performances in terms of when there are changes made, how rhythm changes in Chelsea, maybe not at their best. However, I do think this was a better performance quite clearly than the LAFC one that had a stronger team out there. I thought Liam Delap, let's talk about Liam Delap, because I think Liam Delap, most exciting part of this, and has been the most exciting part for me so far of this tournament from a Chelsea perspective. Seeing how he's come into the starting 11, seeing some of the things that many of us were excited about when Chelsea were beginning to be linked with him, and seeing how he did at Ipswich, and then taking that to a higher level and seeing how he could operate at a higher level where he isn't in a relegation sort of destined team where effectively he's just hoping that the ball gets launched up to him and he has to do a lot of work on his own. We see a variation within his game. You can see absolutely how he can help Chelsea in transition in terms of very much relieving the pressure, being a good runner on the ball, having the physicality to hold off defenders and get Chelsea out of trouble. I could absolutely see across the course of the season how that could help Chelsea. But also just his all-round game. There was an early chance outside the box where one of the things I like about Delap is that it feels like, it sounds obvious, but it feels like he's constantly trying to find a way to get the ball to goal, like to take a shot at goal from every angle, from every opportunity. I love to see that, especially in a game now where we have so many players, particularly attackers, who at times feel very restrained or kind of content to kind of recycle possession. Delap, to me, has that bit of an unorthodox kind of maverick style to him, which I do enjoy. And of course, it led up to his goal. But there are other positive things about the first half. Josh Achimpong having a shot, Fernandez having a volley. There was a combo down the left with Noni Madueke. And then before the end of the first half, where Chelsea should have probably been 1 or 2-0 up at this point, Achimpong makes his solo run, kind of inverting from the right, starting as a right back, wins the free kick. And then we got this chipped Enzo Fernandez cross to the back post where Tosin Adarabioyo was there to put in a brilliant header towards the opposite corner. And that was 1-0. I spoke about Tosin starting this game and I was happy to see him start. I spoke about his set piece ability more from a defensive point of view, but obviously here we saw it from an attacking point of view, and that was really good. And then very quickly after that, Chelsea took full control. Enzo Fernandez chipping the ball towards Liam Delap. There was so much about this goal that I liked. Now, you have to caveat it with, we're not dealing with the highest caliber of opposition here. Liam Delap really struggled against Flamengo. He had an easier time of it against LAFC. But the way in which he took this goal was reminiscent of a certain somebody. I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not saying, again, it's very easy to compare players. Very easy to say, oh, he's the next this, he's the next that. I've done it before. Usually it's very naive, right? It's a style of goal I just haven't seen a Chelsea striker execute for a long time, where it's a brilliantly chipped ball by Enzo Fernandez, who had an amazing first half. I mean, he was chipping, passes consistently. He was full front and centre in terms of Chelsea's creativity. And I think, Enzo Fernandez has become and is becoming the player I think we all hoped when we signed him. He really is starting to take an influential role, especially across the course of last season from about November until now. He has been one of Chelsea's most consistent and best performing players, especially from a creative point of view. And in this game, he was kind of all over it, really. He had a field day in terms of these chipped passes where he sets up the first goal, he sets up the second. But the way, Liam Delap takes the ball but then shields the defender, another defender comes in, he feigns past him and then just casually, calmly rolls the ball past the goalkeeper. Just so instinctive, like he's been scoring goals for Chelsea for a number of years. It looked, I always think it's quite impressive when you see a new player come in and they look like they've been playing with the team for a longer period of time. These are early signs and we are still very early days. And of course, once the serious stuff gets going in the Premier League and Champions League, obviously it's going to be another level for Liam Delap and the scrutiny on him is going to be to another level. But Great stuff, and just happy that he's been able to get off the mark in this tournament, and I suspect will be Chelsea's striker going into the knockouts, because we know Nicholas Jackson not only has one but a 2-game ban. I think it's an extra ban. They've added an extra game onto it. The second half, we saw there's another big narrative. Andre Santos doesn't start the game, but he does come on the pitch. And in terms of subs, we get Dario Sugo and Mark Guiu in the hour mark. And then Andre Santos and Tyrique George, who combined for Chelsea's third very late on in the 67 minutes. We also got to see a little bit of Mamadou Sarr very late on in this game. So, yeah, Andre Santos, just to talk about him, it's positive that he came off the bench. I think the one negative is that I see Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall start this game and in an advanced midfield role, effectively a number 8 role, in the way it looked like a 4-2-3-1, but effectively playing as a number 8. And Santos comes on in a bit of a deeper role, and he has a few awkward moments, and there was at least one moment where he went from defence to attack, and that was really positive, and nearly won Chelsea a penalty that got overturned by VAR when we thought it was a handball to begin with, and obviously sets up Tyrique George very late on for the third. I would just like to see him play that advanced role, and I think that there is some justification to say, like, why is Dewsbury-Hall playing there when Santos could? Maresca was asked about it, and he has explained it's about adapting to the system, it's about getting used to the system. However, again, it's kind of undermined when you play Dewsbury-Hall to me, because that's not a key integral player for Chelsea over the course of last season. If Caicedo is playing there, if Cole Palmer is playing there, obviously you understand that from this is a guy who's been playing for me week in, week out. I trust him. You're going to have to prove that you can play in that role. That's understandable. If you're playing a player who probably doesn't have much future at Chelsea in that role over him, I understand why some people are frustrated. But at the very least, we got to see a bit of Andre Santos. And listen, that's a lot better than the first 2 games where he wasn't used at all. So steps in the right direction, and hopefully we'll see a bit more of him. I think it's the positive. I just hope the next time we see him, he's utilised in a more attacking role, because I'd be really intrigued to see how that works from a Chelsea point of view. In terms of Christopher Nkunku, effectively playing the role he's very rarely been able to, especially under Enzo Maresca, and that's kind of a second striker, number 10 type position. He had a few bright moments. He had a few awkward moments. There were lulls in the game, and just generally where, Nkunku doesn't really, in an obvious way, take control of this opportunity. I think it's more just a selection that kind of poses questions for me, because it's a bit like, if you're playing him, is there a role for him now at Chelsea? Or is it gamesmanship? Is it about putting him in the shop window? I'm not entirely sure. But it's definitely a strange one, because I think many of us predicted he has no future at Chelsea, but now he's getting a role in the team suddenly out of nowhere. I don't suspect, unless there's a major injury crisis, I don't suspect he's starting against Benfica, for instance. I wouldn't be surprised. We're at a stage of the competition now, once you get into the knockouts, where you think Chelsea are going to start playing their serious team again. So rotation might not be there. So it may just be one appearance, and that's about it for Nkunku, and he may still end up leaving this summer, which I think is still the most likely. George goal, very happy for him. Josh Achimpong, really happy to see him playing. Malo Gusto did play as well, and I think that's best just to keep Motka Correa rested. But Josh Achimpong looks very, very comfortable in this role. I've said this before. He just looks like someone that, again, a bit like Liam Delap, looks like a player who's been playing this role for a long period of time. And actually, I think Chicago Dimitri pointed this out watching the game. He kind of looks more suited to the role that Maresca wants right back to play in his system, kind of inverted, moving into central midfield. A lot more casually and a lot more comfortably at times than even, say, Reece James, but especially Malo Gusto. He has to be above Malo Gusto in the right back understudy department now. He has to be second choice. He has to be that player that if Reece needs to be rotated, you bring him in. I think it's undeniable. And the great thing about Josh Achimpong, we've seen him even play a little bit in midfield. We know he can play as a centre-back as well. So there's a nice versatility to him. I think there's a real ability to move him up and him become a very valuable squad player across the course of the season. I really like what I see. I think he's got a good mindset about him. I like the fact that he's consistently looking to drive forward, make things happen, be a proactive defender. And from a physical point of view, he's got an imposing frame even at a young age that you think is going to suit him well in the English game as well, and the way Chelsea want to defend. So I think Josh Achimpong, really, really happy to see him play, and hopefully we'll see a lot more of it, even if, of course, Reece James comes back in. And the main positive for me, I spoke about player fatigue pretty much from the start of this tournament. And what I loved about this from just a rotation point of view and giving players rest when they really need it. Levi Colwell, Motka Correa, Reece James, Trevor Chalobah, Cole Palmer, Moises Caicedo, and Pedro Neto all got the night off. They were in the squad, but they did not come off the bench. That is a real positive. Just for one night, especially in that sweltering heat, it gives other players an opportunity to impress, which I think is important. And then you also have the added benefit of resting players who have played a substantial amount of minutes. And I suspect basically all of those names will be starting on Saturday against Benfica. And that is the big positive. We now face Benfica. I think there's a scenario, I know there's other group games to finish out, so it may tweak a little bit. But if you look at the side of the draw Chelsea now find themselves in, you've got Benfica, you've got potentially Palmeiras, more South American teams. Chelsea have kind of, again, by losing, have avoided this nightmare side of the draw. And you kind of look at it and go, if Chelsea are at their best, they could potentially get all the way to the final, where they are likely going to meet maybe City, PSG. But of course, we've got a long way to go. And the level of performance hasn't exactly been top tier. And I think that's something that's obviously going to have to be there against Benfica, who were just coming off the back of an impressive win against Bayern Munich, who did rotate themselves. So there still is a bit of uncertainty in terms of levels in this tournament. And, Benfica are a quality European team. They are a team that Chelsea have played in the Champions League before. They're a team that regularly make it to at least the knockouts of the Champions League. So but it could be a lot worse. Of course, we'd rather be in a situation when you're playing Benfica than you would Bayern Munich. But I still think Chelsea will be taking it absolutely seriously. And maybe, I think if Chelsea get through the next stage, it's kind of that point where you think, well, you want to go all the way and win it now. And that's the positive. So, listen, I think some people, it's all in balance, right? It's all in, not going overboard. there are things about this tournament that have frustrated me from like a selection point of view. Head and shoulders top of them is Andre Santos, right? And maybe some other players who could have played. But we've reached the knockout stages now. Chelsea winning 3-0, Liam Delap scoring, Josh Achimpong playing, Tyrique George scoring. I think, Enzo Fernandez, his influence being as positive as it is, I think is really, really good. And from a way he can go to another level next season. I think if Enzo Fernandez continues on the form he is, he will be one of the top contenders for player of the season next year. If he can actually put together a literal full season of form, I think he will be one of the top contenders. So seeing that link with Delap, obviously from an early stage, is really, really impressive. And hopefully that can be built. Delap setting up Enzo in the first game, now Enzo setting up Delap in the third game. Hopefully that continues, that connection, because that could be key, specifically in this tournament. So those are my thoughts on the game. Please do give me your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We'll be back again with any breaking news regarding transfers, because obviously we've had some Jamie Gittins talk quite recently, and as I predicted in my previous news show, I think he will become a Chelsea player, and the reports are kind of suggesting very similar at the moment in terms of that getting over the line and him becoming a Chelsea player, although of course we can't use him in this tournament. So we'll react to that. I'll give you my extensive thoughts on that if it does come to fruition, and any other thing around Stamford Bridge. So thank you for watching, for listening. Follow my Substack. Please do share this video and podcast around with friends to get more people involved in the community. Have a great Wednesday, and I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.